Okay, I'm going to try and get one more done before I stop for the day. My winter preparations. The royal gathering had been a failure, and I ended up bedridden, having to drink some potions to recover. But the harvest festival itself ended without issue. Welcome back, Lady Rosemine, Gil said upon my return to the temple. I sighed. And so, I have returned. Did anything happen while I was gone? There is much we need to discuss, he began, prompting Fran to step forward. And to that end, Gil, please guide Lady Rosemine to her orphanage director's chambers to talk there. It will be more peaceful there since she has just returned from the harvest festival, and her things are currently being returned to the High Bishop's chambers, he suggested, indirectly saying that I would get in the way of the movers. I heard him loud and clear, and so we headed to the orphanage director's chambers with Gil and my guard knights. Here you are, Lady Rosemine. Gil served me tea once we were inside, which I sipped as he caught me up on everything that had happened while I was gone. He was making clear strides in his tea-making skills, and while he still wasn't as good as Fran, he was a lot better than before. He told me about how much paper and how many picture books they had made, how much ink they needed, and so on, before moving on to talking about a tromba. A stretchy tree appeared in the forest while we were making paper there, and we all cut it down together. It was large enough that the soldiers had to help, he explained. They said that we had done very well, and that since they didn't need the young thin branches, they were allowed to take those with us. We've already peeled away the black bark. Lutz had apparently negotiated with the soldiers to let us take all the young tromba wood with us. As long as nobody was hurt, I'm glad to hear that. Afterward, Ingo came to the workshop to discuss improving the printing press with Lutz and the Grey Priests. I believe Lutz will have a more detailed report on that for you. I'm looking forward to that. Just thinking about improving the printing press made me excited. What sorts of changes do they have in mind already? What about the kids from house? Are they fitting in well? Would it be okay for me to go and check up on them? We can go to the orphanage if you would like. Oh, yes, I would. There is something I need to ask Wilma after all. And so I headed to the orphanage with my guards. Wilma was surprised by my sudden arrival, but when I explained that everyone else was busy moving things back in my room, she giggled. You have so few attendants, Lady Rosemont, that those matters often prove to be a handful. Do I really have that few attendants? I've heard that most blue priests maintain about 5, which is as many as I have. I also knew that the former High Bishop had about 6 attendants. I say about, since I wasn't sure whether Delia counted, but still, we weren't too far off from each other. That is enough for most blue priests, but you are the High Bishop, the orphanage director, and a forewoman all at once. I believe you would want at least 3 attendants for each position, Wilma replied. As it stood, she was handling the orphanage, Gil was managing the workshop, and Fran, Monica, and Nicola were taking care of the High Bishop side of my work. Considering that Nicola also usually went to the kitchen to help out, I basically had 1 attendant for each job, which did indeed seem like a lot of strain on them. I will discuss this with Fran and Ferdinand, and increase their numbers if necessary. In any case, how were things here with the Harvest Festival? Did you have enough food? Yes, we finished it without issue thanks to your preparations, Lady Rosemine. Even though many of the blue priests had left with their personal chefs, the orphanage had many gray shrine maidens who knew how to cook now. They had managed to survive the Harvest Festival without starving, thanks to us preparing food ahead of time. How are the children from Haas holding up? Are they fitting in now? At first, there were some problems with their attitudes being so different, and I sometimes saw them at a loss for what to do, but the priests and shrine maidens who had lived with them in Haas provided some assistance, and over time, everyone came to understand these differences, Wilma explained. The kids in the temple had been raised here without ever going outside, so they weren't too familiar with the concept of people thinking differently from them. But they had recently seen Les and Leon working in the workshops, as well as Johann and Zach visiting as craftsmen among other guests, which had made it easier for them to accept. How are winter preparations for the orphanage going? We had already started boiling jam, drying mushrooms, and doing everything else we can. More firewood was gathered in the forest this year than last, and what we bought through the Gilberta Company have already been delivered, she said. Pig Day was still a ways off, but this year we'll be doing it together with the Gilberta Company, and with their experience from last year under their belts, they wouldn't have any problems. Excuse me, Lady Rosemine. Nora and Martha were asking whether the orphanage spun thread or weaved fabric for its winter handiwork. As we had never heard of these things, I wanted to ask you about them. Should we acquire what would be needed to do them this year? Wilma asked hesitantly. Weaving and spinning were the most important kinds of winter handiwork that a female commoner could do. They were necessary to make clothes for your family, and sewing skills were an important factor in becoming a beautiful woman who men wanted to marry. However, gray priests and shrine maidens were given clothes from the temple. At the moment, we had just been buying cheap used clothes from poor lower city stores for the dirtier work in the forest or printing in the workshop. Honestly, it would end up a lot more expensive for us to buy thread. Even those who were bought by nobles were given clothes and hand-me-downs in the noble estates. And since basically no priests or shrine maidens ever got married, sewing and weaving skills didn't really matter that much. As the temple provides clothes, there's no need to make them. I'm not currently considering weaving to be important. However, it might be nice to prepare wool and knit clothes in general so as to have warmer attire for the winter. Last year we had bought old sweaters for warmth, but the more warm clothes one had during the winter, the better. For this reason I decided to order wool and knitting needles from the Gilberta Company so that the orphanage could work on knitting this winter. Having warm clothes will be much appreciated. Nora and Mars seem to know how to knit, and it might be wise to ask Tuli if she has the time to help as well. Wilma replied, seeming quite enthusiastic. It would probably be a good way to kill time over the winter, too. After telling her about the tithes that were being prepared in the castle to be sent to the temple later, I stood up from my chair. Before you go, Lady Rosemine, there is one more thing I would like to ask. Oh no. I drew a few more illustrations of the High Priest using the art utensils provided by Lady Elvira, but I am unsure of where to take them. Please show them to me at once, I requested, and soon I was face to face with an illustration of Ferdinand drawn using soft colors. It had Wilma's filter over it, of course, so Ferdinand was basically radiating a heavenly aura. This really makes Ferdinand look like a saint, but that's just not right. He definitely doesn't give gentle smiles like this. They're dark and full of evil. I was screaming on the inside, but as far as I could tell, Elvira really did see Ferdinand like this. She would probably cry tears of joy upon seeing it. Please wrap it up in cloth, place it in a chest, and bring it to my orphanage director's chambers, I instructed. There was a chance that Ferdinand would find it if it was brought to my high bishop's chambers, so I decided it would be best to leave it in my orphanage director's chambers instead. As you wish. Having finished talking with Wilma, I returned to my chambers with Gil and my guard knights. The unpacking had already been completed. Lady Rosamond, please spend the remainder of today resting. You would be quite busy starting tomorrow, Fran said. Over half of the Blue Priests had already returned from the Harvest Festival, and as the High Bishop, I would need to listen to their reports with Ferdinand tomorrow. I would then have to retrieve the small chalices from the Blue Priests who had visited provinces ruled by other nobles, and after confirming that all the golden chalices were accounted for, I would line them up on a shelf and lock them away. Managing the chalices was part of the High Bishop's duties, and we will be refilling them with mana over the winter's dedication ritual. Furthermore, you will need to decide on both the ritual and home visitation schedules, Frank continued. The tithes that the Blue Priests had acquired during the Harvest Festival would later be brought from the castle to their homes, and so they would thus be visiting their homes to accept the delivery, but since there was so much to move around, the process would turn into a huge mess, and thus we created a schedule and had them leave gradually over time. These are the temple's, or rather the Blue Priests' winter preparations. You will need to visit the castle to retrieve your own tithes, Lady Rosamine, but that can be done when you give your report to the Archduke. It seemed that I would need to go to the castle and give a report to Sylvester once all the Blue Priests had returned, and I had all the chalices. That, too, was the duty of the High Bishop. The plan is for the castle to prepare my tithe and send it over via wagon, I said. That would be a great help, but your winter clothing is going to be prepared in the castle as well, correct? We will need to bring that here as well, and you will surely have many meetings over your winter debut, Fran said, listing out all the reasons why I would continue to be busy even now that the Harvest Festival was over. I had assumed everything would be the same as last year, and that I would only need to prepare my chambers and the orphanage for winter. But all of my new responsibilities meant that things weren't quite so simple. I had assumed that everything would be the same as last year, and that I would only need to prepare my chambers and the orphanage for winter. But all of my new responsibilities meant that things weren't quite so simple, and so began a series of meetings with Blue Priests that continued day after day. Their main job had been to retrieve the chalices, but they also told us about the tithes, tax officers, and atmospheres of each farming town. Some Blue Priests went into surprisingly thorough detail, while others simply noted that not much had changed from the previous year. Ferdinand, might I suggest delegating some administrative work to Kampfer and Freetic? Neither are from wealthy families, and it seems they will take their work seriously if paid a proper amount. I do not have the time to teach them from the ground up without knowing how motivated they will prove to be, Ferdinand said curtly. As it turned out, he had actually delegated work before, but the Blue Priests were so incompetent, and the former High Bishop so intrusive, that he had ultimately decided to just do everything himself. I know that you get work done faster and more reliably than everyone else, but you're so busy right now because you always use that as an excuse to take on more work. You should learn to delegate, even if things end up taking longer as a result. After all, Bezidwans isn't here to get in your way anymore, I said. Now that Bezidwans was gone, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Ferdinand wielded absolute power within the temple. There was some Blue Priests who had been minimizing contact with Ferdinand to protect themselves from the High Bishop, and now Ferdinand could use this opportunity to train them. How many Blue Priests would normally be doing the work that you've taken it upon yourself to manage? Just so you know, Sylvester was giving you more because he assumed you were bored and had an abundance of spare time here. Have you not been telling him how much work you really have? Work given by the Archduke must be done swiftly and properly. What point would there be to reporting the amount? All he needs to know are the results, Ferdinand said. I couldn't help but sigh about how strict his attitude toward work was. Who had raised him to be like this? Veronica, most likely. I had read in a book once that keeping your superiors updated was one of the fundamentals of a smooth workflow, and while the people here didn't seem to respect that, it was certainly important. One key aspect of a smooth workflow is keeping everyone up to date on what's going on. For example, Sylvester relaxed the printing schedule a little after I told him how I felt. He said that I could continue at my own pace. You told him you could not finish the work you were given? Ferdinand asked, his eyes wide with disbelief. I pursed my lips in a pout. I didn't say that I couldn't do it. I just told him the truth, that he was being so unreasonable about it that I didn't have any spare time at all. He assumed that you would be doing it all for me, Ferdinand, and was very surprised when I told him that I was taking the lead myself. And that was enough for Sylvester, of all people, to agree to slow down. I see he is very soft on you, Ferdinand said, crossing his arms with a frown, but really he was the weird one for piling so much work on me when I was so sickly, and, at least in appearance, a child. He would probably just say that it only made sense to give work to those who were capable of completing it, but I didn't want to do more than I had to. I just want to read. Give me reading time. In any case, the one thing I can say for sure is that you should not expect me to do as much work as you, Ferdinand. I simply lack the stamina for it, I said. My hands were already going to be full with the dedication ritual and dealing with noble society over winter. My body couldn't handle much more. You have a fair point, but I have prepared more than enough potions for the both of us. Well, I don't think a lifestyle dependent on potion abuse is very healthy. Actually, Ferdinand, I really think you need to learn to live without relying on them. If you don't reduce your workload to a point you can handle on your own, you're going to collapse one day. Don't make me tell Riarda about this. Ooh. Yeah, threatening to tell Riarda about this. At that, Ferdinand gave an extremely displeased scowl. He could no doubt imagine what Riarda would say to him, or yell at him, rather. Yeah, she would tell you to stop doing it, to let your body rest. You can't keep continuing like that. Reducing one's workload is no simple matter. What would you have me do? First, you can go to the castle less frequently. I know it's a key part of gathering information, but since they give you work every time you go there, I think staying at the temple and having Justice gather information in your place would be better, I suggested. Yeah, the guy's known for gathering information. Let him do that. Ferdinand tightly knitted his brow in a deep frown. But if I do not go, then work will continue to pile up on Sylvester's desk. That's Sylvester's work. You can let him handle it. How will Ehrenfest survive when its ruler cannot even handle personal responsibility? Despite everything you say, you are actually spoiling Sylvester quite a bit. You should be as strict with him as you are with Wilfred. It didn't take long to realize that the only ones Ferdinand considered family were his half-brother Sylvester and Karlstedt, his older cousin. And when I told him not to spoil the Archduke, he looked shocked. Me? Spoiling Sylvester? Nobody has ever accused me of that before. Think about it. You tell me to clean up my own messes, don't you? And while you help with the work that I can't do, you never help me with the stuff that I can handle myself. Is the work on Sylvester's desk the work he literally cannot do? If we have an Archduke who can't handle his own work, that's a pretty big problem. Yeah, I have to agree. Let him handle his work, and if it's something he absolutely cannot handle, then have Ferdinand help him with it. Not do it himself. Or not have Ferdinand do it himself. Have Ferdinand help him with it, and then they can get it done quicker, and he can know how to do it next time. Ferdinand closed his eyes and shook his head, stroking his chin. He attempts to push the work onto others, but he is not incapable of doing it himself. Sylvester should work at least as hard as Wilfred is now. Please prioritize your work in the temple over helping Sylvester's. And finally, delegate some of your own work to other blue priests to give yourself some spare time, I said with a clenched fist. Ferdinand looked down at me, his interest caught. Spare time, And what purpose would that serve? It's for your health. It has absolutely nothing to do with me wanting more reading time. At last you reveal your true intentions, but, well, I suppose your points are valid nonetheless. In that case, when Sylvester makes unreasonable demands of the temple, I expect you to be there as the High Bishop to stop him. Ferdinand said with a grin, unloading more of his more annoying duties onto me. Strange. I wanted to reduce my own workload, but now I have even more work. Why? Because you're trying to help him, too. That's why. He has to delegate more work to people, and who is he going to delegate it to? The Blue Priest and you. Once I had received all the chalices from the Blue Priests, I arranged a meeting with Sylvester and headed to the castle with Ferdinand. As soon as we arrived, I started driving to his office in my one-person panda bus, simultaneously asking Riarda to make the necessary arrangements so that I could take home the prepared parts of my tithe on my way home. I also asked how Wilfred's studies were going. Wilfred is making steady progress in his task list. I have since replaced half of his attendance, and he's now studying harder than ever before. He throws himself at the karate each and every day, saying that he'll beat you next time for sure, milady. He can now read most letters and all numbers, though he needs to practice his writing a little more, Riarda explained with a lively expression on her face. She really did love raising kids. See, that's the kind of people who do need to have kids. Even if you adopt them. Those are the kinds of people that have kids that really enjoy raising them and teaching them and seeing them grow. Since I was already there, I decided to teach her a card game that involved addition as a key component. Wilfred will probably learn a little bit of math by playing it on top of everything else. His Heartspell practice is going well too, and he should be capable of playing a song by winter. He always ends up throwing a tantrum since he's learning through repetition. But after crying and stomping his feet for a bit, he gives up and practices all sullen-like, Riarda added. Lord Sylvester and Lady Florencia were both shocked to see how quickly he's progressing, and I can hardly express how happy they are. They're beyond thankful, milady. Any parent would be happy to see their kid escaping disinheritance, and since Wilfred knew how pleased they were, I was sure that he would keep working hard. As we arrived at the Archduke's office, I put away Leslie and entered the room of Ferdinand. There was a large stack of paperwork on his desk, just as he had said there would be, and upon seeing Ferdinand walk in, even the scholars nearby looked as though they had been saved. Uh-oh. They're not going to be saved. He's going to ignore them. Ferdinand ignored them all, told Sylvester that I had brought all the chalices back, then gave a report on the Harvest Festival. So the Harvest Festival went off without a hitch, huh? Sylvester remarked. Good going, Rosemine, and I hate to ask, but I'm going to need you to fill up 10 extra chalices just like you did last year. No. What? What? Who said no? Oh, Rosemine did. Why? My reply was instant. Sylvester blinked in surprise, then cocked his head. It was clear from the look on his face that he couldn't understand what I had just said, or simply didn't want to understand, so I explained my reasoning for turning him down. We can't do the same thing we did last year. I need to enter noble society this year, and the temple has fewer people due to the incident in spring. Bezin must have been a flawed man, but as one would expect, given his family's status, he had noticeably more mana than the other blue priests. Last year had been hard enough, and no way our shortage of mana and blue priests, or forget my lack of stamina. If you absolutely must give them the mana, then you may come to the temple and donate it yourself. Wait, me? Is it not expected for nobles to take responsibility for their actions and solve problems they introduce themselves? You were the one who accepted this request without asking me what I thought, so it is therefore up to you to get yourself out of this mess. No matter how hard we try, the temple simply cannot manage more than half of those chalices. Ehrenfest is just as serious of a mana shortage as anywhere else. I don't know what political deals have led to Sylvester taking on these chalices. We don't have the resources to take care of other duchies on top of ourselves. And should they absolutely need to be filled, Sylvester can surely use his own mana, or send more blue priests our way. There has to be something he could do. Sylvester quickly gave up on convincing me, turning to look at Ferdinand instead. Ferdinand, no, my sincere apologies, but this is the decision of the High Bishop you appointed. I am but the mere High Priest serving beneath her. Furthermore, do you recall what I told you last year? Just this once. I believe it was what Rosemine... I believe it was. Rosemine is correct. You are the Ob, so solve your own problems. Ferdinand said with his lips curved into a grin, rejecting Sylvester in a tone that lacked even a trace of remorse. Ooh, yes, Ferdinand, yes! Tell him no! Do it himself! Sylvester opened his eyes wide and cradled his head. Judging by that reaction, I could tell that Ferdinand had only accepted the request last year after much grumbling and complaining. I'm afraid the temple simply has no leeway whatsoever. Please do your own work without relying on Ferdinand, Sylvester. Do you not need to serve as an example to Wilfred as both his father and the Ob? I asked, giving Sylvester and the scholars who had looked so desperately at Ferdinand a dignified smile. At that, I tugged on Ferdinand's sleeve, and we sped out of the office. Ferdinand, shall we return to the temple? Why so soon? I believe we should wait until the dust has settled. Because you are incapable of relaxing for even a moment. Sylvester's scholars will ask for your help if we stay in the castle, and you will ultimately agree to do his work for him again, I observed. Ferdinand drew his brows together. Despite his frown, his lack of protesting meant that I had been right on the money. I could still remember Fran mentioning that even when Ferdinand had brought his attendants to the nobles' quarter during the Starbind ceremony, and offered them to rest, or ordered them to rest, they had ultimately gathered to discuss work anyway. Ah, jeez, he and Fran are way too alike. If you wish to work that much, do your work in the temple. And while you're at it, train your successor. In the event that you decide all the blue priests are beyond saving, you may train a gray priest instead. Oh, for doing the paperwork, but not for actually being the high priest. Once Ferdinand freed up his schedule and started using his spare time to seriously train a successor, he would spend less time piling things on me, which would decrease my workload. A voice in my head was saying that he would never let me get off so easily, but I decided to ignore it. But yeah, the voice is right. Now there is an idea. Training my successor, Ferdinand mused, glancing my way before crossing his arms and falling his lap. Why are you looking at me? I don't like this. This can't mean anything good. Ferdinand, stop looking at me, please. He's gonna train you, you idiot! Oh my god, why did you say that? When she said train his successor, I thought she meant train his successor as in training the new high priest. Or next high priest. That's what I thought. I was like, wait, why would he train a gray shrine gray priest when they might not have mana, you know? The epilogue. Welcome home, Lady Bridget. And so I have returned, Nadine. With the harvest festival over, Bridget returned from the temple to her room in the night storms. Here she was welcomed with a smile by Nadine, an apprentice attendant who had left her home in Ilgnir to accompany Bridget and manage her dorm chambers. Her family was one of the few good-hearted ones who had stayed in the province after Bridget's engagement was cancelled. Nadine had been asked to take on the role by Bridget's older brother, Gabe Ilgnir, and then subsequently ordered to by her own parents, but Bridget was still thankful for her continued support even after she moved to the temple. Lady Bridget, the warm water is ready and waiting for you. Bridget removed her light armor, took a bath to refresh herself, then sat down to enjoy the tea that Nadine had prepared for her. It was her favorite kind. As she savored the taste, she could feel the tension melting away. Guarding subjects for extensive periods of time always left her feeling uneasy and exhausted. There's nothing more calming than relaxing in my own room after a day of work, Bridget mused. She had informed Nadine of her return in advance so that everything would be ready when she returned, and her trusted servant knew what she liked down to the letter. Bridget also had a room at the temple to sleep in where Nicola and Monica could help tend to her when necessary, but the lack of magic tools and her own attendant always made it feel somewhat inconvenient. Lady Bridget, please do not compare your dorm room to the temple, Nadine said with a thoroughly dissatisfied look. She was a noble herself and so didn't want her work compared to that of Temple Grey Shrine maidens. Bridget could understand that since she herself hadn't considered the temple somewhere suited for nobles before being assigned to work there, and in reality the work of commoner attendants just couldn't be compared to what noble attendants like Nadine could do. As I have said before, Lady Rosamine and Lord Ferdinand carefully prepared my room to suit my every need, so the temple is nowhere near as inconvenient as I had heard. Bridget replied, continuing to sip her tea. Nadine wasn't about to change her mind on the topic, but she at least seemed less prickly about it than she had been when they initially arrived. When Bridget had spent her first night in the temple, Nadine's eyes were full of despair, and she had muttered something about needing to inform Gabe Ilgnir of the travesty that was taking place. Bridget knew that he wouldn't be too surprised, though. After all, her brother had allowed her to serve the Archduke's adopted daughter for Ilgnir's sake. He wouldn't be surprised, but I knew for certain that he would curse himself for his failings as a Geeb. Even the supposed filth of the temple is nowhere to be seen, at least not where Lady Rosamine goes, Bridget said. She is being treated very well as a member of the commander's family. Rosamine had an absurd amount of mana, and while it was only right that she be adopted by the Archduke, it must have been difficult for Karlstadt to give up his beloved daughter. He and his family were very worried about Rosamine now that she was the Yob's adopted daughter. I am aware. The commander summons you each time you go to train. Cornelius interrogates you about life in the temple when you cross paths, and Lady Elvira invites you to exclusive tea parties. Everyone knows that, Nadine said, and she was right. What's more, everything that she had described was usually done in front of older nobles, which made it common knowledge that Bridget was being favored by the commander of the Knights Order and his family. This had in turn changed how others looked at her, and there were fewer insulting whispers now, and friends who had previously been avoiding her were now speaking to her again. I know that it was right for you to become Lady Rosamine's guard knight, and that this is all in Ilgnir's best interest. The fact that the commander's family trusts you so much after just one season is proof of your hard work, but still, I'm frustrated by your poor reputation in noble society, Nadine said, her eyes lowered in sorrow. Bridget knew the people believed she had fallen into despair at her engagement being cancelled and agreed to enter the temple out of self-destructive desperation. They were only half right, though. She wasn't self-destructive in the least, and if not for her situation, there was no doubt that she wouldn't have considered serving Rosamine or agreeing to work in the temple. Ilgnir's future matters more than my reputation, does it not? But in any case, I will be attending one of Lady Elvira's tea parties tomorrow afternoon. Is everything ready? Of course, I have finished preparations for us both, Nadine said with a happy smile, her chest proudly puffed out. She very much looked forward to attending Elvira's tea parties with Bridget, since they always serve unique and tasty sweets. I really must thank Lady Elvira for her consideration. Just as Bridget had suffered from ill-meaning gossip, Nadine had been forced to endure as others cruelly remarked at how hard it must be to serve someone visiting the temple, asking whether she had given up on marriage as well. Eventually, the situation became so bad that Nadine stopped smiling entirely. It was only when Karstadt's family started offering them their support that the light returned to her eyes. If you finish preparing for the tea party, Nadine, I'll be spending the morning training with the Knight's Order. Wait, on your day off? You intend to train on the day of the tea party? Nadine asked with a surprised look. Bridget nodded, her lips curling into a wry smile. Considering what had happened on the night of Shitsaria, she knew that she needed to train as much as possible. She might not have known the details, but considering the material they had been after and Rosemind's poor health, it was all too obvious they were gathering the ingredients for a Jarive. And if they needed a Ruel harvested on that particular night, then Bridget could guess they were heading back to the same forest next year. That was why she needed to be capable of taking on large hordes of Fey beasts for extended periods of time. Guard work in the temple is lengthy and intense, but affords me no time to hone my skills. I need to get training in wherever I can, Bridget explained. I see, though as your apprentice attendant, I would rather you not do any training that might leave scrapes and bruises before the tea party, Nadine said, looking somewhat worried. Bridget thanked her for her concern, then got into bed. When Bridget headed to the Knight's training ground the next day, just as she had told Nadine she would, she found that Eckert was there already. He had accompanied Rosemind during the Harvest Festival, and fought alongside Bridget on the night of Shitsaria, and judging by how he was swinging his spear against multiple targets at once, it was obvious that he was training for next year's gathering as well. Bridget readied a similar spear and also began to practice on the targets. It wouldn't be hard to knock them all out with a low sweep. The tricky part was finding a way to kill them all at once so they wouldn't be able to eat each other and get stronger. Bridget, the commander's asking for you, one Knight called out just as she had stopped to take a break. After giving her thanks, she headed to the commander's office. Inside was not only Karstad, but Eckert as well. Karstad stroked his mustache once before addressing them. Bridget, Eckert, welcome back from your lengthy Harvest Festival assignment. I heard from Lord Ferdinand that the Ruel harvesting ended in failure. He asked me to get the details from the both of you, given that it was mostly over by the time he arrived. Who wants to begin? As Karstad looked between them both, Eckert began to report on the events of the gathering and what everyone had been doing at the time. Bridget, is there anything you'd like to add or contest about Eckert's report? Lady Rosemind was not responsible for the outcome. She was successfully able to harvest a Ruel from the tree, but a Xanth managed to steal the fruit from her. The gathering only ended in failure because of our ineptitude as regards. That they had allowed a Fey beast to even get close to Rosemind was incompetent to say the least. And this was only made worse by the fact that when it consumed the mana-filled Ruel and evolved into a Goltz, Rosemind had ended up needing to protect her own guards by containing it in a wind shield. There were no other means by which to contain a Goltz that strong and with that much mana, but as for Guard Knights, I find that our failure is inexcusable, Bridget said. Eckert nodded in agreement. We failed because we lacked information on what special properties the Ruels are imbued with on the night of Shitsaria. We also didn't bring enough Guard Knights, and those of us who were there lacked the skill to protect her. As a result, we were forced to summon Lord Ferdinand. They had managed to keep collateral damage to a minimum by following Ferdinand's orders, but one wrong move and the Knight's Order itself would have needed to be summoned. I see, with that many Fey beasts swarming the tree, it seems we will need more firepower next year, Karstad noted. In that case, I would suggest removing Damiel the Lay Knight and instead bringing along more Arch Knights and Med Knights. Bridget said, remembering his inability to deal with the huge swarm of Fey beasts. It was hardly his fault given that he was a Lay Knight with that much mana, but she believed it would be best to leave him behind next year. After all, this was on a completely different level than from guarding Rosemind in the temple, where most people considerably lacked mana. Dang it. Karstad stroked his chin as he considered Bridget's suggestion. I understand your point, but we want knowledge of this gathering kept to a minimum, with as few people involved as possible. And seeing this as this is a personal business, I wouldn't be able to command the Knight's Order to accompany us anyway. In this case, even a lay noble would be better than nothing at all. True enough, Bridget replied. If only those familiar with Rosemind's private life could be involved, it was probably best to bring Damiel. Lord Ferdinand and I will accompany you all on the night of Shitsaria next year. Until then, focus your training around wide-range attacks. Yes, sir, Bridget said with a salute. While she thought the Op having his very own guard knight accompanying his daughter's material gathering was beyond overprotective, she wasn't against it. The love that the Karstad family had for one another warmed her heart, and it was thanks to this affection that Bridget's efforts to help her brother were being rewarded. Incidentally, how is Rosemind holding up as the High Bishop? And are you having any problems in the temple, Bridget? Karstad asked, changing the subject, and giving his usual questions once they had finished going over the night of Shitsaria. Bridget told them about Rosemind's time in the temple and what she had heard from other knights. 3 female knights asked to serve Lady Rosemine the other day, but Lord Cornelius refused them without ever bringing the matter to you. He believes they say that they saw that Angelica guards her only in the castle, and assumed that they would do the same without going to the temple. The truth was, however, that Angelica simply wasn't allowed to leave the noble quarter because she wasn't yet of age. As soon as she was, she too would join Rosemine in the temple and lower city. The girls had asked to serve Rosemine not knowing that, and Cornelius turned them down, without explaining why. He warned me that Angelica is likely to become the subject of jealousy since she gets to serve Lady Rosemine as an apprentice guard nag without needing to visit the temple, Bridget continued. Cornelius had warned Bridget over and over again that Rosemine could drop dead in an instant if they weren't careful, which was why he was being exceptionally cautious about the people who got close to her. Again, such overprotectiveness was heartwarming, but it robbed him of a level head at times. This was in part due to the fact that Cornelius was still a child, but this wasn't really a matter that Bridget could state her honest opinion on since he was an archnoble and she a med-noble. I see. I haven't informed many others that Angelica will be accompanying her to the temple as well, since that allows us to better judge the intentions of those asking to serve Rosemine, but that jealousy might prove problematic. I will tell Cornelius to explain why he is refusing them next time. Understood. Furthermore, I have heard that some intend to serve Lady Rosemine only until they come of age. Once they have graduated from the Royal Academy, they plan to return home and begin preparing for marriage. Only a rare few, such as Angelica, are willing to continue visiting the temple after coming of age, so please take care. Understandable, considering the brief window for marriage that women have. You have my thanks for your feminine perspective. Bridget, a man such as myself wouldn't notice details like that. But in any case, that should do for now. You have a tea party to attend this afternoon, right? Go and enjoy yourself. Avara poured her all into the sweets that are being served to Descartes said warmly his kind words, bringing a smile to Bridget's face. That night, Bridget sent an ordinance to her brother Gebe Ilgnir. Dearest brother, I am gaining the trust of the archducal family as one of their retainers. Lady Rosemine expressed her interest in Ilgnir's varied lumber industry during the harvest festival. Am I proving useful to Ilgnir? I believe that my decision to serve Lady Rosemine was the correct one. She is an adorable girl, though admittedly strange in more ways than one. Please look forward to her winter debut. Okay, we get to see this again, but not now, that's next time. I will have to do that tomorrow. I will see you all next time.